Wow. Thank you, Nick. I went to the movies this weekend. Imagine that. And I saw a movie called Lion. And never really done like movie testimonials before, but I would not actually be offended if you got up right now and left and went to the Terra Theater and stood in line to see this movie. It's a must. It is a must see. Very briefly, it is about a 5-year-old Indian boy who gets separated from his brother, gets on a train, and the train takes him clear across the country. So he is displaced from his family and never makes it back, and goes through the hardships of being 5 years old, of living on the street, surviving, and going through all of that, which ultimately leads to an orphanage and then him getting adopted by an Australian family. And it's much later, 25 years later, that he actually makes his way back home. But it's gut-wrenching, and it's beautiful. And at the end of the movie, there is a paragraph on the screen that says, yearly, more than 80,000 Indian children are lost or abandoned, kidnapped, in 80,000 a year. So it's almost as if it's a commonplace thing. And if you're a parent, or if you have a heart, you will be a mess. You will be a beautiful, beautiful mess. And I love being a beautiful mess. But there was a scene in this movie that is directly in alignment with what today's topic is about. He's 5 years old. You got to remember this. He's already been traumatized. He's been scavenging for food for several months. He has slept in alleyways and on cardboard boxes, and has done everything he could to survive. And finally, an Indian woman befriends him. And he's crying, and she comforts him, and she takes him home. And she feeds him. And she bathes him, and is very nurturing, and he gets to sleep in a bed. And you're thinking, as you're watching this, what a kind woman. What a wonderful, kind woman. And then the next morning, a man shows up in her little flat, and they begin to whisper and talk about him and point at him. And then the man comes over, and he starts to look at his arms and do all of this. And what you realize is that he's being examined for sex trafficking. And he's 5 years old now. But something happens, because the man leaves, and the woman sits him down to eat breakfast. Now, it's food. And you would think this child, having been through already months of what he's been through, would just sit there and eat the food. And he doesn't. He sits there and he looks at her. And there is this brilliant discernment that happens in a 5-year-old mind where he goes, I need to get out of here. And he runs. And because of that, he escapes that particular route or path of what his life could have ended up. And I sat there and I went, wow. How would a 5-year-old know to do that? How would a 5-year-old have the gut instinct to realize that this is not a safe situation and I need to get out of here? And that is what our topic is today. It's about gut instinct and the fact that everyone possesses that. Sometimes it's known as intuition, but I like it more in its primal, raw context. That it is this interior roar, if you will, that doesn't want to be silenced. And I want you to imagine how much effort it must take within us individually to silence a roar. And those are the polarities that I want to talk about. The gut instinct, the intuitive roar that wants to lead us into greater expressions of who we are, and then all of the layering of false belief and domestication that we've accepted that covers that. So imagine those as two polarities. And this book this month that is a part of our curriculum is called Blink. And it's by an author named Malcolm Gladwell, who I absolutely love, who one of his books called The Tipping Point was a really great motivator for me. And Blink is all about gut instinct. But he calls it thin slicing. Thin slicing is a psychological and a philosophical term which says that in brief moments, we possess all of the information that is needed in order to make the correct decision. A thin sliced moment, it's in that immediacy. In the shamanistic world, they call it flying in the face of the mirror. What happens when you're in front of a mirror? Everything that you do is immediately replicated in the mirror, right? And so that's the same thing as this thin slicing or this gut instinct, is that in the moment, without the need for all of the extrapolation and all of the information and all of the discussion, you already know what to do. You already know what to do. Just like that 5-year-old boy in the movie knew exactly in that moment, get out of here. How many of you have had those pivotal gut instinct moments and you actually listened to that and adhered to that and it proved yourself right? And then how many of you second guessed that and went, that makes absolutely no sense at all? What will people think? And then you pay the consequence for that, right? And so when we look at those things, aren't you fascinated as to, well, what is gut instinct? Where does this come from? How do we as human beings possess such a powerful and such an intricate connection to divine direction? But isn't that what our spiritual path is all about? See, we understand that this is not who we are. What you are is vibration. What you are is energy. And that energy and that vibration is condensed into skin and cellular tissue and bones and respiratory systems and all of this thing. But it's not who you are. If you were able to take yourself and to look at yourself under, let's say, a godly microscope, what you would see is movement. Energetic movement, energetic vibration. And that vibration is the creative essence of life itself. So you and I are walking, breathing, vibratory creation, life. And we understand that the way in which this life gets into its full expression, in other words, expands, in other words, moves into a greater cavity, a greater mammoth spread of its ability to glean, to manifest, to be, to harmonize, to create. The way that it grows into that is through consciousness. In other words, awareness. So to your right and to your left are seated people who have a varying degree of awareness. Just look right now and determine if it's bigger than yours or more than yours. Go like this. This helps. No judgment here. Right? And so even though we are all on the same path, we're what? We're at different intervals in this journey or this expedition of uncovering who we are. This self-awareness. In understanding, I'm not my body. In understanding, I'm not my faults. In understanding, I'm not my history. What I am, in the immediacy of right now, is vibration. And that this vibration is directive. And as soon as I own up and I understand that, then I can, in the immediacy, regardless of what I've done up until now, change my thought and ultimately change my life. That's the science of the mind, which is our philosophy. Imagine that, right? So you're not this body. But you and I are so used to looking at the body. We're in a world, in a human world, that only talks about the body. But can you imagine? That's like talking about one course in a meal that has infinite courses. And so what you are is a well-stocked smorgasbord, a banquet that will never be fully explored. That's the immensity, that's the power of what we are. It's why we came into this expression, right? And so one of the gifts of this vibratory energy, when we become hungry enough and enthusiastic enough to become more self-aware, more self-loving, more willing to look at humanity and understand that every single one of us are one. When that level of compassion begins to take over and it becomes the impetus by the way in which we think, speak, and act, then the vibration of what we are becomes more in alignment with that which we call God. And we become God in action. We become life or essence in action. Little o you, little o me. Simply from the willingness to own what we are. So in that ownership, things begin to happen. All of a sudden, we have gut instinct. We have gut instinct that was there when we were children that hasn't been overlaid and hasn't been covered by our adult cynicism. All of a sudden, all of these pure gifts begin to resurface, and the clarity is there. And so our job then is to ask ourselves, is this what I want to be? Do I want to be able to cultivate this activity of thin slicing, to be able to get at the root of something in the immediacy, to honor my knowing rather than discussing it to death? And so it is. It's, you want to know one of the great successes of thin slicing is speed dating. Have you ever heard of speed dating? Where you go and you just sit and you look and go, And you talk enough, and I tell you, I think Marianne Williamson said long ago, she goes, you will learn everything that you need to know about someone within the first 5 minutes of dialogue, especially by looking them in the eye. What you begin to understand is that when you give yourself over to that gut instinct, that ability, that wisdom, that discernment, you can surpass all of the noise and all of the fear. And so as we talk about polarity, what do you think then is on the other end of this gut instinct gift? What do you think it is? It's judgment. This judgment, then, is not something that you just picked up and cultivated on your own. The judgments that I include myself, the judgments that we possess that are the dense covering of our gut instinct are things that we learned culturally, things that we learned within our family dynamic, things that we learned from our religion being raised. And even though you've left those particular environments, we still carry with us those judgments if we are not dutifully doing our work continuously in order to be more self-aware. So what that means is now, and we see it all pervasive every single day, when something different than me comes across my radar, I can either use the gift of my gut instinct to know what to do in that moment, and might receive it as a beautiful gift, or my judgment might get in the way, and my fear then is produced, and then I immediately create separation from that person or that thing. Why do you think there is so much racial tension and division? Why do you think there are religious wars? Why do you think that there is so much divisive separation within our world? It's because that end of the spectrum is the thing that has been cultivated the most. If you are different, you are wrong. And in our month of inclusion, in our month of the celebration of diversity, we again address the idea that oneness does not mean sameness. And so when something different comes across my field of vision, I want to be practiced enough to know whether or not I'm operating out of fear or bigotry, or to know that I'm letting that gut instinct, that thin slicing psychological, philosophical viewpoint lead me into my perfect exchange of what needs to happen. And like anything, it's cultivated. It's cultivated. Anything that's cultivated means that you and I have intentionally given ourselves over to the study, the absorption, the immersion into wanting something more than what exists right now. I will tell you, the other end of the spectrum, which is judgment, is easy. It's also lazy, because it's just maintaining and continuing what we've always been around. If you want to break through your bias, your bigotry, your separation, and your fear, it's going to take commitment on your part to meet the lie over and over and over again and make a different choice. So our founder, Ernest Holmes, wrote in The Science of Mind, he said, since the individual subjective mind is the storehouse of memory. So let me stop there. Where is all of this? Where is this gut instinct? And where is this judgment and fear? It's not out there. It's inside. What does that mean? What does that mean? Again, if you've taken any class, you've heard me talk ad nauseum about the fact that in this consciousness, there's two components. There's the conscious, unconscious way in which we make day-to-day decisions, but there also is this subjective part within us. It's been called the warehouse. It contains every sentient thought. Now here's the thing. Most of us think that our world consists of the time we were born until present day, this hour, this minute, right now. I want to ask you to consider the fact that everything that resides within you subjectively, all your prejudices, all your habits, all your motivations, all your beliefs, not all of those things are simply cultivated from the moment you were born to this present hour. But if that subjective component that exists within all of us, and it's the same component, if that same universal subjective component exists within all of us, then what that means is what's inside of me is the bigotry of the ages. What's inside of me is the fear of all recorded human time. What's inside of me is all of the hostility. That's why we say when you spot it, you got it. And that's your favorite catchphrase, right? Because it's simply saying that whatever you're observing, you have. Whatever you and I are judging, we have inside of us subjectively. Otherwise, it wouldn't register on our radar. And so this thing, this Carl Jung brought this to light, this shadow part of us, when it isn't examined, rules us. And we think it's everybody else. But here's the great news. If that subjective mind component, that consciousness that's within us, has that, guess what it also has? It has the genius of a Michelangelo. It has the brilliance of an Einstein. It has the courage and the bravado of a Harriet Tubman. It has the creativity of any master. It has the forward thinking of all of the great scientists. It has everything in there that is equivalent to what we call God. That's in there. And so then it becomes a matter of what? Which one am I going to entertain? Am I going to entertain the one that has that thin sliced gut instinctual knowing? Or am I going to have the part of me subjectively that is always repetitively regurgitating everything out of my mouth that I've been speaking, that my family has been speaking, that all of my friends have been speaking, that my religion has been speaking, and nothing changes? And I get to be right. Do you see? Do you see what you are? You are this vibratory, energetic vessel of subjectivity that gets to choose. Why do you think then Science of Mind says change your thinking? In other words, change your allegiance to what you focus on, change your allegiance to the understanding of who you are, and by golly, you will change your life. Somebody else won't change your life. You will change your life. And so when we understand then what we are, he goes on to say, the individual subjective mind is this storehouse of memory. It retains all that the eye has seen, the ear heard, or the mentality conceived, since it contains much that the outer men never even consciously knew, and is the receptacle of much of the race knowledge through unconscious communication. It must, and it does, have a knowledge that far surpasses the objective faculties. That's the gut instinct. What it's saying is that what you have inside of you knows exactly what you need already. Now, sometimes in the immediacy of our humanity, we might not know. But I want you to get out of the habit of saying, I don't know. Because I want you to get into the habit of saying, I might not know now, but there's something inside of me that does. And you have to say it with a cute little impish grin, and you have to bend over, that does. And they'll go, oh, you go to SLCA. I want you to get in the habit of owning your power. I want you to get into the habit of thinking and revering yourself as infinite potentiality. Not because it's grandiose, not because it's ego-based, because it is what you are. And anything unlike that, any path that half-heartedly attempts that, is a half-hearted path. And you and I were meant to live wholehearted expressions. And I can sit here right now and I can ask you to name who you are inspired by. And you are inspired by not half-hearted people. You are inspired by wholehearted people who said yes to something much more magnificent than what they thought they could do in that moment. They took that quality of discernment and they allowed themselves to surpass, as Ernest Holmes says, what their objective faculties told them was reality. You see, the opposite of this thin slicing gift is looking at things at the surface and making your judgments based on what you see. You get that that's not reality, right? What's reality is what is internal. That's why you can have two different people in the same situation having a different experience. Because one of them sees it through their perceptive lens and the other one through theirs. Consciousness is not confined by your birth or how old you are now. It is a universal awareness. And we either allow ourselves to get on that bandwagon of consciousness or not. And so one of the best ways is to look at what you resist. You know, if meditation is what you resist, come and be a part of the meditation class. Be uncomfortable. Be scared. Do something that scares you every single day. Only if nothing more for you to realize that there was nothing to be afraid of. How else are you going to know? How else are you and I going to break the boundaries of our self-imposed confinement unless we realize that? And so what this concept, this thin slicing concept is it's beckoning us to wake up from a deep sleep. Hashtag stay woke. That was pretty cool, right, Nick? Thank you. Stay woke. All right. So, how do you do that? How do you do that? Real quickly, number one is you have to be curious about yourself. And when I say curious, you have to be curious about your triggers. Why does this set me off? Why do I perpetually whine about this thing? Why do I keep repeating this kind of behavior in my life? if nothing more than what you're doing is you're stepping out of the emotion of it, and objectively you're looking at these things and you're realizing that somehow you're playing a part in this. I'm playing a part in this. I have to be curious enough. I have to ask myself, where did this thought come from? And sometimes I might not know. I ventured off earlier this morning, but it's fascinating to me, when I tell you that your consciousness didn't start from your birth to this present hour, but it's something, if you subscribe to the idea that you are an eternal being, that we've been carrying with us multitudes of times. What does that mean? What's the implications of that? Whatever it is that I don't get right now as David Ault, I get to keep practicing. And whatever it is that I spiral up and transcend with regards to self-imposed limitation no longer has to hold me back. Now, wouldn't it be silly if all of this work ended the moment that you took your last breath? Doesn't that seem a little ludicrous? If your soul is an eternal being, then don't we take with us everything that we've gleaned and learned up until this point? And so I have to be curious as to ask myself, why am I thinking this? Why am I having this argument while driving in my head with somebody that happened 10 years ago? And why am I so enthused and excited about how I just annihilated them? Rather than being equally fascinated and equally revering the way in which I turned that around towards an understanding that everybody's just doing the best that they know how to do. And as we talked about last week, all of us have some psychic wounding going on. Number 2 is I have to understand and realize that everything out there is a lie. What does that mean? We always talk about effect, and that effect is just like a kaleidoscope, just like a prism. It's a refractment of what I'm thinking. It's a projection, like a movie screen, of what my mental atmosphere is. And all that is what's going on inside of me. It's a lie to think that that's the truth. Because the only truth is really, there's only one power and one presence in the universe, and that power and that presence is God. So the lie, the generational lie, the historical lie that resides within us subjectively that says, why bother? Nothing's going to change for you. Really? You think you're going to do that? Don't you remember when? ... The only way that that lie is going to be dismantled and dissolved is if you and I pick ourselves up and we go and we meet the lie. And in that moment, whatever decision that we always made being prompted by the lie, we make the opposite decision. I was working with somebody, not in Atlanta, but they were telling me, I can't stop sleeping with them. Every time I sleep with them, I feel bad the next day. And I beat myself up. And I'm so angry. And then we don't talk. And then we talk. And then I sleep. And then I go through the cycle again. And they loved telling the story. And I've told my mom this. And I've told all my friends this. And everybody says, stop. And I don't stop. And so I listened, and I basically just said, stop it. I said, nothing's going to change. I said, eventually people will tire of you telling the story, and you will run out of listening ears, and maybe then you will reconsider your actions, or you will really look at the lie of why you think you're powerless in this situation. And in that moment, when you meet the lie, you say no. And then you say no again. And then you say no again, if that's what you want. Just like the alcoholic says no to that first drink, and then the next drink, and then the next drink. Just like the person who has been deflated and beaten mentally and abusively about who and what they are, picks themselves up and enters into a situation anyway. And they do it again, and they do it again. It's the way in which the Japanese proverb says, fall down 7 times, but you stand up 8. And then you stand up again, and then you stand up again, and then you stand up again. We have to go and meet the lie and put action into that rather than discussing it to death. And you understand and know that you are the only one then that can prompt that action. And lastly, the action must come from the heart, not from the mind. I should say the brain. Because you understand the mind that we are talking about, consciousness, isn't about the human brain. The portal of consciousness is where? In the heart. Where do you think the gut instinct sits? In the heart. So people who are wholehearted, who live from that portal, from that guidance, override the intellect, override what the world is telling them, override what it's supposed to look like, and they obey their heart. And sometimes that's easier said than done, particularly if we have a propensity for peer pressure and if we're concerned about what other people think. We will immediately jump back to the heart, to the head. And so when I think about how the world is calling you and I to show up completely differently, I don't think we have the luxury anymore to sit on the other side of the fence and allow the fear to be the thing that makes our decisions for us. That whatever it is inside of you that feels that you're not enough, that you aren't the Gandhi, that you aren't the Martin Luther King Jr., that you're not the effectiveness that the world needs, I want to tell you that's a lie. And the only way that you're going to meet that lie is if you and I get up off of our things and once and for all, we begin to put action into the principles of our spirituality. I was a little disheartened because I sent a follow-up email after the Pledgers intention-setting seminar. The intention-setting seminar was designed for all of us to look at our values and to pick those values that we're really passionate about, to create the statement, and then to let that statement be the thing that leads us. And from Cambodia, I wrote an email and I sent it to David Aurelio and I said, please send this out to the pledgers. And the email started with, it's been a couple of weeks since we've done this, and I really want to know if you did the exercise. I really want to know if you sat down with those values and you crafted your statement so you say, this is who I am. And I said, I want to hear it. Email it to me. 2 people emailed it to me. And part of me said, maybe you don't do that seminar anymore. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with not holding things in sacrosanct that you have to keep repeating this stuff all the time. What I'm interested in is, what does it have to take for all of us to rise above the conformity and go, oh, this doesn't matter, or I don't have time. You and I don't have the luxury for things not to matter anymore. So I want to close with a poem, or actually it's a prayer by a nun. And I'm sure you're going, a prayer by a nun? Well, that will be pious. Well, hold your habit, because her name was Regina Sarah Ryan. And she actually left the convent in the early 70s because she embarked upon a path of mysticism. And I thought, this is the perfect prayer. This is the prayer that I want all of us to pray on a daily basis. Deliver us, O God, O truth, O love, from quiet prayer. from polite and politically correct language, from appropriate gesture and form, and whatever else we think must put forth to invoke or to praise you. Let us instead pray dangerously, wantonly, lustily, passionately. Let us demand with every ounce of our strength. Let us storm the gates of heaven. Let us shake up ourselves and our plaster saints from the sleep of years. Let us instead pray dangerously. Let us throw ourselves from the top of the tower. Let us risk a descent to the darkest region of the abyss. Let us put our head into the lion's mouth and direct our feet to the entrance of the dragon's cave. Let us pray dangerously. Let us not hold back a little portion, dealing out our lives, our precious minutes, and our energies like some efficient accountant. Let us rather pray dangerously, unsafe, profligate, wasteful. Let us ask for nothing less than the infinite to ravage us. Let us ask for nothing less than annihilation in the fires of love. Let us not pray in holy half measures, nor walk the middle path for too long, but pray madly, foolishly. Let us be too ecstatic. Let us be too overwhelmed with sorrow and remorse. Let us be undone and dismembered and gladly left to our own device. Ah, what structure, if deceit, we have created. What battlements erected, what labyrinths woven, what traps set for ourselves and then fallen into. Enough. Let us pray dangerously. Hot prayer. Wet prayer, fierce prayer, fiery prayer, improper prayer, exuberant prayer, drunken and completely unrealistic prayer. Let us say yes again and again and again, and yes some more. Let us pray dangerously. The most dangerous prayer is yes. And so it is. Hi, I'm David Ault, and I simply want to say thanks. Thanks for taking the time to watch our broadcast here at Spiritual Living Center of Atlanta. We have a vision, and that vision is to reawaken all to their spiritual magnificence. And one of the ways that we are able to do that is through this very medium of broadcasting. So if you got anything out of this, if you felt in any way inspired, or if something spoke to you directly, then I extend an invitation to you to become a part of our family by donating. And there are many ways in order for you to be able to do that. One is to simply go to our website at slca.com, and there you will find all different kinds of prompts that will help you support what it is that we are doing here in Atlanta. One way is to become a pledger. That means that you decide on a monthly basis that you are going to help us with this vision. Another way is to donate through our management system called Fellowship One, another through PayPal, and another even easier way is on your cell phone. You can do what's called text to tithe, and that number is 404-796-7030. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I invite you to come back weekly to see what it is that we're up to. Blessings.